Hello, my name is Christoph Martinsons from CSTB. This video is about optical lock-in spectroscopy for monitoring lighting and light pollution, 24 hours a day, even in the daytime. Light pollution is a concern in cities. In this picture taken in Shibuya, in Tokyo, we can see a lot of light sources. There are displays, billboards, and also street lights. And it's very difficult to isolate the individual contributions of these light sources to the light pollution in general. Even in smaller cities and villages, street lighting might be very difficult to characterize because of the presence of daylight. A common form of light pollution is obtrusive light. This is light sent, for instance, on the facade of a building. It may originate from signs and displays, but also from street lighting itself. The difficulty is to know the respective contributions of those light sources. The main difficulty is to differentiate the various contributions of natural light sources and the different forms of electric light sources. This allows us to identify the sources of obtrusive light and also to measure very small quantities of light attributed to a single source while we don't turn off the other light sources. Our technology makes use of temporal light modulation to untangle the different electric light sources. In doing so, we can lock the spectral radiometric measurements to the specific temporal light modulation of a light source to study. This plot shows temporal light modulation associated with most AC-powered lamps and luminaires. This graph shows a typical waveform of temporal light modulation of a common electronic display. This graph shows the temporal light modulation of a typical dimmable lighting system controlled by pulse width modulation. This graph shows the temporal light modulation measured on an outdoor digital dynamic display. Let me now demonstrate the optical locking spectrometer in real use outdoors in full sunshine. I'm now standing near a small desk lamp that we would like to measure using our optical locking spectrometer. It is connected to a telescope with an optical fiber. The graph on the top left shows the traditional spectral distribution measured without locking detection. The graph at the bottom shows the amplitude and phase spectral distributions. I am now using my smartphone to control the color of the lamp. It is really difficult to see because it's very dim compared to the ambient light. I will turn it on in the blue color, and you can see the locking spectrometer just detects the blue peak and not daylight. I will now turn the color red on, and we have a second peak showing up. If now I'm adding the green color, I will have a white light, and again the locking spectrometer just detects the light from the lamp and not the light from the sun. If I turn the green color off, I have two peaks again, and if I turn the red off, I will have the blue peak, and daylight is still very well rejected by the optical locking spectrometer. Let me now give you some details about how the CSTB optical locking spectrometer works. It is an instrument designed to measure temporally modulated light. The measurements should be locked to a reference frequency, and its outputs are spectral distributions in amplitude and phase. Well, the first application is to measure weak spectral signatures buried under intense backgrounds, as you saw in the previous example with sunlight, for instance. It can also be used to greatly improve the signal-to-noise ratio in spectral measurements. And of course, it eliminates electronic offsets and dark components. This diagram shows how the mobile CSTB optical lock-in spectrometer works. It is based on a single compact array spectrometer, which has a CMOS sensor fitted with an electronic shutter and an external trigger. This feature is very important because we need to acquire series of spectral distributions synchronized in phase quadrature for each modulation cycle of the signal. The CSTB optical locking spectrometer can be coupled to a telescope to have a real-time monitoring system for lighting and light pollution in the urban environment. It becomes possible to isolate each individual contribution of each type of light source to light pollution in various places, such as protected areas or building facades of interest. There are many other applications for the CSTB optical locking spectrometer. It can be used to measure spectral reflectance and spectral transmittance of materials outside, even in full daylight. It can be applied to measure temperature in radiation thermometry. It can be used in chemical analysis for dark materials, for instance, where there is very little signal, and the detection of trace gases. If you want to have more information about the optical locking spectrometer designed by the CSTB, here is a list of scientific papers that were published on the subject, as well as the reference of the French patent that was recently granted. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this video. Should you wish to have further information about the CSTB optical locking spectrometer, please contact me or my colleagues at the CSTB. We'll be happy to assist.